Hey everybody, this is Erica, the technology nerd likes to film stuff, and it is time for the full review of the Moto Z and the Moto Z Force. Keep in mind that the Moto Z Force is only going to be available exclusively on Verizon. It's not going to come unlocked like the Moto Z, but these are two really interesting modular phones. I like them. Hopefully I can help you decide if they are for you. So let's go ahead and check them out. So looking at these phones, I love how Lenovo has dealt with modularity. The structure and the integrity of the structure doesn't have to be messed with here. You have modules and still a really nice feeling phone, so I feel that they've done modularity the right way. So looking around both of these phones, they are both fairly similar. First thing that sticks out to me is that they're both incredible fingerprint magnets. It just looks really nasty very quickly. I've done my best, you guys. Really not so nice. Both of these are made out of aluminum, and they both have these gold contacts here on the back. Both have magnets so that you can place the mods on the backs. You can see they both have this nice lined design, but without one of these backings on, both of these phones look incomplete. So I do recommend at least having one of these style shells. Looking at the right-hand side, they both have their power button and volume buttons in the same place. Left-hand side is completely bare on both of them. On the top, you have your slot for the SD card and also for your SIM. We have a microphone here. On the bottom, we have a USB-C port. No headphone jack on either of these. I'm hearing reports that there are phones that are about just as thin that could still fit a headphone jack. And I know on this one that they definitely could have fit a headphone jack. So this looks just like a media headline to compete against Apple, honestly. But at least they include an adapter. Also on the back, they both have this camera hump. Both have a dual LED flash, although you can see that the lens is a little bit bigger on the Force. Looking at the front of both of these devices, both have a 5 megapixel front-facing camera. Their receiver and speaker are in the same place. There's also a flash on the front for both of them. Both have a 5.5-inch Super AMOLED Quad HD display. Both have a fingerprint sensor and all of their sensors at the bottom so that you can use Moto display. And neither of them have capacitive buttons here on the front. So it's just this gigantic chin, and I can't really find a particular reason for it to be that way. Now, as a side note, this fingerprint sensor here does not double as a home button, much to my frustration and to the frustration of many others. You can see that it turns it on nice and quickly and accurately. And also, if you hold it down, it turns off the display as well. But as soon as you go into an application, I am so tempted to keep pushing right here to act as a home button, and it does nothing. Maybe in the near future it will do something, or somebody will be able to make a mod for it, but for right now it just feels pretty underutilized. Also, you can see that the navigation bar is on screen and it never goes away, so I worry about burn-in. It just feels that this area is very underutilized, especially when looking at something like the OnePlus 3. You've got the option with this phone to have an on-screen navigation bar or to use the capacitive buttons. Where they differ is in thickness. You can see just how thin the Moto Z is. It's almost ridiculous. It's edging on feeling very edgy or very uncomfortable. In order to enjoy holding this phone, I really need to put one of the style shells in the back. Then it feels okay. Oddly, I find that it feels better to not have any type of style shell or mod on this phone at all. It feels best just as it is standalone. That might be due to this slight curve that we have here on the side. It cradles my hand a lot better. With a style shell on or any other mods, it just feels too thick and cumbersome. The other difference we have is that this is a shatterproof display, akin to plastic. We'll get into the displays and all that in a little bit. And then this is Gorilla Glass 4. So when looking at our displays here, the image looks very nice and close on the Moto Z, very up close to the glass, where the image feels a lot more recessed. So it's going to have to be a matter of taste for you, whether you prefer having the image look really close to your face or laid inset a little bit. Now there is a white model for both of these, but I really do not recommend it because of the amount of sensors that we have here. It ends up looking really quite ugly. Very, very busy. Speaking a little bit more about the thicknesses, let's go ahead and put this battery mod on the Z. and the style shell on the Force. And still, the Z is just a little bit thicker with that battery pack on, but they almost feel pretty much the same thickness. So this gives you an idea of just how thick this one is. So now I wanted to take a second to thank my sponsors at Braintree so much for making content creation possible. Braintree is equated with easy mobile payments. They are a PayPal company who has helped Uber, Airbnb, and GitHub get where they are today with their easy mobile payments solution. Braintree makes mobile payments so fast, easy, and seamless that your business will be up and running in no time, and they're basically a major reason why you can press one button and pay for something. Add it to your app with just a few lines of code, and you're instantly ready to accept Apple Pay, Android Pay, PayPal, Venmo, credit cards, even Bitcoin. And if some other way to pay comes along, Braintree will support that too. They provide a single integration across all platforms with superior fraud protection, customer service, and fast payouts. This all means you'll always be ready, whether you're earning your first dollar or your billionth. See fewer abandoned carts and more sales with Braintree's best-in-class mobile checkout experience. Learn more at braintreepayments.com/Erica. That's braintreepayments.com/Erica. Let's talk about display durability a little bit. So you've got Gorilla Glass 4 on the Z, and you've got a shatterproof display on the Z Force. So we've essentially got a plastic display here. It's composed of several different layers. This outer layer is actually just like a really thick screen protector, and they're going to be selling replacements for this. So if it gets all scratched up, don't worry about it. Don't even worry. You can just go and replace this yourself. If I wanted to, I could slide up under here and peel this up. So I think that that's really nice. I could take this outside right now and drop it, and the thing would be just fine. If I was to take a hammer to it, for example, nothing's going to happen to the thing. It might get a little bit marked up, but, you know, it's fine. I could probably do the same to this one, and probably nothing would happen to it. But I have a feeling that this is going to be a lot more trusting, a lot more durable. I would not be sitting doing this to my other phones. Now, after doing that, you can see that I've got some marks there. They look like some screen protector indentations, but the display is still perfectly functioning. So I think that this is a win. Plus, this is perfectly clear. Before, this shatterproof screen kind of looked a little hazy, and it wasn't perfectly clear, and now this is. So I am not bothered by this whatsoever. Sometimes from the side, I can see a little bit of a rainbow effect. But if this means that I don't ever have to worry about my display cracking and all I have to do is replace the top, that's great. They also say this has a redundant digitizer, so if one fails, the other touch layer will still work. I don't know about you, but I think this is pretty cool. But since this is plastic, yes, it's going to scratch. In everyday usage, keeping it away from things like coins and knives. I have a couple very light scratches here and there, but nothing offensive. It's obviously been hard-coated with something. If we want, we can break out the knife. And once you do that, obviously, that's going to scratch it. But coins and things, I'm sure after constant rubbing against it, yes. But I've been pretty impressed. Now, checking out specs and performance, both of these have the Snapdragon 820 SoC inside of these with 4 gigabytes of RAM, either 32 or 64 gigabyte variations for internal storage, with an SD card slot with official support up to 256 gigabytes. Now, both of these devices in my testing run quite warm. It's about 107 degrees at the hottest point I've measured with these. So talking about thermal throttling and sustained performance, I have played with both of these extensively and benchmarked them extensively. I expected the Z's performance would throttle down more quickly because it is thinner, and I often found that to be true. But in overall testing, they seem to perform quite similarly. Their performance both throttled down over time like other powerful phones, just to keep them from getting too hot. But in actual use, like during games, I didn't find it to be extreme. Still looking side by side at their performance, you can see that they throttle down over time. Here's peak performance, and then they go downward. But yeah, the Force is a thicker phone, so expect it to do a bit better with heat dissipation. Still, both are great performing phones, and I haven't had much to complain about. They rate at the top with other S820 devices and perform very well. Gameplay is very nice and smooth, and they can handle whatever I throw at them. They both just get very warm during gameplay, or even during use during the day, but the style cover does help cover up the back and make it more comfortable because of that heat. So now looking into multitasking with both of these devices, they've got 4 gigabytes of RAM, and in my testing I was able to load 17 applications in RAM and none of them shut down. So it is an app switching champ. Both of these are also very fast at opening applications. I've found them to be faster than others even. Word on the street is that they have UFS 2.0 storage, so no worries here you guys. These are great performers. Now because these are both very close to vanilla Android with just a little bit of skinning, they're very, very quick. The interface is snappy and just feels very fast, like it flies. I don't feel stuttering or skipping or lagging. That's what I've always really liked about Lenovo's phones, or Motorola in the past. They leave the skin alone for the most part. What they do add to 6.0.1 Android I find to be very useful. So underneath display settings, you see that we have a color mode, so you can switch between vibrant and standard. We will talk about how well these are calibrated. So that's really nice to have this option. I'm seeing more and more AMOLED phones come out with these options. And then otherwise, we've got the Moto app here. So you've got Moto Actions, Voice, and Display. Moto Display is probably the main integrated feature. So anytime you move your hand over these sensors at the bottom, it will give you the time and also any notifications that you have. When there's a notification, you can peek at it, and you can go right into the notification from here, or you can even dismiss it so it no longer shows up. Then with Voice, you can set launch phrases so that you can control your phone hands-free. And then you've got Actions. So you've got Approach, which was the trigger for Moto Display. You've got Attentive Display, so while you're looking at it, the display won't go off. You can chop twice to turn the flashlight on, do the same to turn it off. Flip for Do Not Disturb, so if you want to silence your phone, just turn it upside down. Pick it up to make it stop ringing. Swipe to shrink the screen, so you went up from the bottom. So that's for one-handed use, then touch here to make it go big again. And then twist for quick capture. And there you have the camera. So not many modifications, but the ones that are on here are mostly app-based and are very, very useful. So now let's move on to talking about the Moto Mods, which is the main part of this phone. The whole purpose, it seems, is they really want people to use these modules, and they've even given developers a $1 million incentive to create their own modules. They've even said that these modules should work for future generations of the phone. Now, I don't know if that's true. We will just have to wait and see. But this seems to be what the Z line really is all about. Expanding functionality of the phone without having to change the phone in any way. Just simply adding it like a little pack. Sticks in place with the magnet. Very nice and secure. So in general, for all the mods I've played with in my kit, they all connect securely, and I'm not afraid that they're going to fall off. Maybe they will pop off if you drop them, but I'm not willing to try that theory. So you can see here I've got several things. This is the projector. We've got the JBL speaker and also a battery pack. This one is not inductive charging. There are ones that do have wireless charging. So even though these mods fit nice and securely, I am a little bit worried about some of the style shells. You can see that looks to be a little bit of a gap here where the materials are coming together. So when I pop this on, you can kind of easily get your thumbnail underneath it. Now, depending on how your shell was put together and the materials, it may or may not be easy to remove like this. So that's something just to look out for, but still, once it's in place, it's not really going anywhere. These are very nice and strong magnets. You can see, it's pretty much staying there. I'm not going to bounce it up and down, but you get an idea. That's on there pretty well. And you can see that this isn't going to go anywhere because you've got a little nub. It goes right in here and it stays put. What I find so cool about the Moto Mods is that they really are plug and play. They're completely dummy proof. There's no setup process at all unless you just have to accept some permissions. But still, that's like yes or no. Once you plug it in, it makes a nice reassuring vibration. And it already gives you options for settings right here. Nothing to install at all. Just so, for example, battery mode. It's already giving me some options of what to do with the battery right upon plugging it in. And you can see I've got that reading there too. So the way that they have done this is brilliant. It just works. I couldn't have asked for a better implementation. So we're going to be talking about each and every one of these, but the only device that these kind of makes sense with to me is the thin phone, just the Moto Z, because once you start adding them, as I mentioned earlier, onto this thicker phone, it just becomes way too heavy and way too cumbersome. They sure did decide to knock down the profile of this phone for the sake of adding mods to it. So let's go ahead and start with the battery pack. Looking at the battery pack, if I just touch right here, it tells me that there is a charge. This is a 2,220 milliamp hour battery. So you just plug it right here. You can see that it fits perfectly with the profile of the phone. It's like it's part of it. And that's not going to come off. In order to get this off, you need to put your fingernails under here and lift upward. So obviously with this Z phone, I definitely recommend getting a battery pack of some kind, whether it's one of these Moto Mod ones or you go and invest in another battery pack. My complaint about this battery pack is that it doesn't charge the phone very quickly, and these are pretty expensive. I believe this is 80 bucks. Yes, it does really conform to the phone, but is that worth it to you? I don't know. With this 2,220 milliamp hour battery pack, I did get to do some battery measurements to see what it was like and how long it lasted. So my force was at 0%, and I let this basically charge the phone up until the phone turned on. So I got an hour and a half of heavy use with it, and it also charged the phone up to 30%. So this will help you in a bind. I expect for the Moto Z for it to last an hour and a half too of heavy use, but having more of a charge than 30%. A cool option that you have with the battery pack are two different battery modes. You've got default and efficiency mode. So default mode is going to keep charging the battery. It's going to try to keep getting it up to 100%. But efficiency mode will only start charging the phone battery once the phone battery drops below 80%. So that's going to essentially have this battery pack last a little bit longer. In terms of charging this battery pack, there is no port to plug this in. The only way to charge it is to keep it backpacked onto the phone. And in my testing, I noticed that it doesn't charge very fast. The phone will charge up much, much quicker than the battery pack will. So I hope that gives you a couple things to consider. But if I've got the cash lying around, or if there's a special deal on this, I really would go for one of these. So now let's look at the InstaShare projector. This is a $300 little projector that you have here. You've got a little kickstand so that it can sit and you're able to view at multiple angles. But my beef immediately is that there are other Pico projectors out there for the same price, or maybe even just for a little bit more, that are more powerful than this is. Plus, this is only going to work with just one device. It's only going to work with the Moto Z and whatever other phones that Lenovo or Motorola decides to have this work for. So I think it makes sense just to get a designated little Pico projector instead of a backpack. Also, I'm sure a lot of people would prefer to have their phone be used as a controller for the Pico projector instead of having it like this, where if you are having a presentation going on, you kind of have to knock it about to change the slides. So just looking at what the specs are of this, it's got a 1,100 milliamp hour battery to charge it. It's got a fan to help keep it cool. At worst, you can hear it when it's quiet, but otherwise when you have audio going, you can't hear the fan. You've got a slider here to bring into focus. This turns on the projector. So to turn on the projector, press and hold, and then you can press down again, and it gives you a couple of projector settings. So you see you have the option for your keystone. So the trapezoidal distortion, when it's at an angle, you can fix to your heart's content yourself, or you can do it automatically. I tend to just keep it on auto unless it's at a very strange angle. Then you can control the brightness as well. So this is a 50 lumen projector, not very bright. You can put out an image up to 70 inches, 480p, so it's not very high resolution, only a 400:1 contrast ratio. So the contrast looks very low, colors look washed out. So for sure, this works for presentations when in a dim room, or in a room that doesn't have a lot of ambient lighting, it looks okay. I notice you're really not going to be watching shows on this. This is not going to be your all-around projector, trust me. And I don't think that's what they meant it for anyway. Nice little projector, but really I would not pay the $300 for it. I just couldn't justify it. Unless you are really a road warrior needing to have instant projection on the go and didn't want to have any other accessories or tripods or anything with you. So the last Moto Mod that I have here is the JBL Sound Boost speaker. And honestly, if you get any of the mods, this is the one that I actually recommend. So taking a look at it, you can see that there is a kickstand here, so you can prop your phone up and listen to music. On the back is a charging port, USB-C, and it has its own 1000 milliamp hour battery pack inside of it, so it's not going to use the phone's battery. The battery will run down on this, and then it can use the phone's battery, so you don't have to worry about this draining your phone. There's also a battery indicator on here. Press that, lets you know if there's a charge. It's so simple to set up. You don't have to do any pairing process, nothing. It just becomes part of the phone. Yes, it does add quite a bit of bulk, but what you get with this is totally worth it. So it's nice stereo sound. You've got two drivers here. This gets to be 80 decibels. That's pretty loud, and I don't hear any distortion either. And I'm surprised that there's actually some nice bass to these. It's just a huge improvement over the itty bitty little speaker that's on this right here. So I'm sure that you could purchase a Bluetooth speaker that's cheaper and sounds even better. I'm not going to argue with you on that one, but in my experience with Bluetooth speakers and Android phones, for whatever reason, I always run into trouble with sound latency. So I see that if I'm playing a game that the sound does not keep up with the animations, and that gets insanely annoying. It seems to be app specific, and luckily with this phone, with my Bluetooth speaker, YouTube and also Netflix don't have this problem, but this is a very wide problem in Android. So instead of dealing with sound latency or having that possibility, I always have nice sound here. I don't ever have to worry about that. So it adds bulk, but it's really worth it, you guys. Also, as an added bonus, this can function as a speakerphone, so that's definitely nice. And also, you're probably going to notice how much this extends outward, but luckily, this does not interfere with the camera. You're not going to see the sides at all, so don't worry about that. Of course, they paid attention to that. No problem. So now let's move on to taking a look at battery life of both of these devices. So we've got a 2,600 milliamp hour battery inside of the Z and 3,500 milliamp hour battery inside of the Z Force. Needless to say, that's quite a bit different. So if you are going to be a heavy user, you're going to need to charge the Z sometime during the day. That's just something you're going to need to expect. It would be good to get yourself a battery pack of some kind, but if you're not having a particularly heavy day, you can make it through. Actually, I was quite surprised. I'm able to get up to 5 hours of on-screen time on this. Wasn't expecting that. Between 3 and 5 hours. If it's the absolute worst, I saw 2 hours. Where this one is going to last you into next year. Not really, but it's going to last you at least a day or more. I actually did a benchmark so that we could see the difference between both of these. I basically set the brightness the same at about 200 nits. So here we have PC Mark pulled up, and I just ran this test until the battery died. Again, same brightness, about 200 nits. So 6 hours and 14 minutes versus 10 hours and 8 minutes. That is quite a difference. That's a 4-hour difference. So this guy is the Energizer Bunny in comparison to this one. No trouble you're going to have whatsoever with battery life on the Z Force. They both have quick charging as well, Quick Charge 2.0. So even though this one is quite small, it does take some of the edge off. And remember, this is supposed to be a modular phone, so they're trying to keep it thin so that you don't have such a thick beast. So now, how about the displays on these devices? Well, we got a 5.5-inch AMOLED display. This is Quad HD over 530 pixels per inch. That's pretty standard for more flagship phones right now. We're seeing a lot more AMOLED displays, a lot of Quad HD displays, and of course, who do you think the manufacturer is? It's Samsung. So you've got that diamond matrix pen tile, but still, this is a very nice, sharp display, very colorful display. Thankfully, this comes with a different mode other than just the standard mode. Underneath the display, you can see that you've got the standard mode and the vibrant mode. Honestly, with the vibrant mode, I feel like stabbing my eyes out with a fork, where the standard mode is actually pretty close to the sRGB standard, so I decided to keep it on the standard mode. But if you like garish, crazy, way beyond oversaturated colors, go for it, more power to you. So in terms of brightness, when we're not using the automatic brightness mode, it gets to be about 400 nits. It's a little bit lower on the Z-Force, but the peak brightness on both of them is over 500 nits. And that's if you're using that automatic brightness mode. So you should be able to see it in direct sunlight. Just remember to go in and use the adaptive brightness mode, because otherwise it's really hard to see that display. The real pity between both of these devices is that I really wish that they would get darker. In bed at night, I don't want to disturb my husband if I don't feel like sleeping, and this still is at a brightness that would disturb him. It's about 15 nits, where something like the Galaxy Note 7 gets down to less than 2 nits, about 1.88 nits. Even my OnePlus 3 can get about as dark as my Galaxy Note 7. So I don't know what gives here. So I did some measurements of both of these displays to see how well they are calibrated. I only bothered with the standard mode because it conforms at least to some type of calibration standard, the sRGB calibration standard, where the vibrant mode is just crazy, garish for people who like very oversaturated colors. So no point in measuring. I can see that with my very own eyes. But as far as how well it's calibrated to sRGB, I can see that they really were trying to target sRGB. I think that the saturations aren't too far off. I don't think that the gamut is too far off either. I also can see that they're trying to target gamma 2.2, which is nice because it doesn't make the display look over contrasty or washed out. It's just about right. Although I do see some weird variations going on there. I suspect it'll be different between so many different panels. Also, it looks like their color temperature isn't too far bluish either. It's 7,000 Kelvin. It should be targeting 6,500 Kelvin, but 7,000 is not overly bluish. My one complaint really would be that their balance of red, green, and blue throughout the grayscale is really pretty bad. There's just not enough red in there. There's way too much green in there. So you end up kind of with a greenish, bluish looking white point. So whites look kind of bluish, greenish. And unfortunately, all colors end up with kind of a bit of a bluish, greenish color cast as well because of all that. And honestly, just changing it to the vibrant mode makes it worse. So the standard mode is the only one that I can stand. It's the first thing I noticed when picking up these displays. Something looked really bluish-greenish to me. Overall, not horrifically calibrated, but that's the one thing that keeps it from being a display that I really, really like. But still, overall, not too bad. So now let's move on to talking about speaker, audio, telephony. So here we have the speaker here. This is the only speaker. There is no speaker on the bottom. So both your receiver and your speaker, as far as quality, I think that it gets loud enough for both speakerphone and for voice calls. For media, it mostly gets loud enough. It's not the best sounding speaker. It sounds a little bit thin. But this is where it's really nice to pop on the JBL sound boost speaker on the back. I also find it annoying that for ringtones, it starts out very quiet and ascends upward. I wish I could disable that, but it's not a deal breaker. It's just something I noticed. I've noticed that with other types of audio too. It'll be really quiet and then you hear it ascend really loudly. It's probably a software thing where it's switching from being the receiver to the speaker. So how about the elephant in the room here? There is no audio jack. So of course, you've got to use an adapter, and they're nice enough to include an adapter in the box. But the concern here is, even with this adapter, is that I know so many people who like to charge their phone at night before going to bed while listening to audio. Maybe they're charging their phone and they're watching a movie or something while not wanting to disturb their loved one beside them. You can't do that anymore. You've got one or the other. So that's going to be a sore point for a lot of people. But in terms of the audio quality, I've been hearing pretty decent things. I am not an audiophile, you guys, but from all my research that I've done so far, with what other bloggers and people are saying, is that the audio sounds pretty good. It's got a nice flat frequency response to it. It gets pretty loud as well. So nice, loud, clear audio. I'm really not sure what the DAC amp pairing is on this. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just the Snapdragon one. If anybody knows, please leave a comment in the comment section below. But without having that headphone jack there, it makes me wonder what types of audio components that they can fit here now. Maybe you can have a nice dedicated DAC and amp. As for phone calls, this works just fine as a phone. As I mentioned, speakerphone gets decently loud enough. It's just fine. Seems to be nice and clear, hearing people nice and clear, no issues there. Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, I haven't had any issues with any of them. Now, both of these are Verizon phones. They are unlocked, so you can put SIM cards in from GSM networks, although I just wouldn't recommend it. I would seriously get the unlocked Moto Z if this is what you're going to really want. The Z Force is going to be a Verizon exclusive. If you want to use it on other carriers, I can show you what bands are supported and my experience. So you can see it says 4G LTE. You've got band 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 13. So there is no band 12 for you T-Mobile people. I was able to pop in my SIM and get LTE on both AT&T and T-Mobile, but wasn't really able to stay on LTE very well. That could be due to my area. As for the T-Mobile one, it could be due to not having band 12. So just keep this in mind if you must have the Force. The last thing that I want to talk about in this review are the cameras. So we have a 13 megapixel camera that's on the Z, and we've got a 21 megapixel camera on the Z Force. I have to say right away, I really wish that the 21 megapixel camera was on the Z because it seems to best the Z's camera in every way. So we'll talk about that. But moving on with specs, you can see that we've got a dual tone LED flash on both of these. This helps with white balance. We've got optical image stabilization on both of them and laser assisted autofocus. On the front, we've got a 5 megapixel camera and a flash. So if you're somebody who wants to take selfies in less than favorable lighting, you've got that. Taking a look at the interface is much better than it has been. And that is because we now have a manual mode. So if you touch here, you can see you've got several modes. This one right here is your manual mode. So I can push this down here and it's going to open up all the settings. Or you can control them individually. So you've got your focus control, you've got your white balance control, you've got your shutter speed. It only goes up to half a second. So don't be expecting to keep the shutter open for a really long time on this phone. You've got your control for the ISO and also exposure compensation. So that is a setting that's really nice to have, something we have not had before. If you pull from the left, you can see you've got some general settings. Shutter sound, you can choose where you want to store photos. Quick capture, which was that cool little twisty action. That just makes it so handy to activate to take pictures. I wish every phone had that. Photo size for the Z is 13 megapixel max. So 4.3 is the native aspect of the sensor, and anything else is going to be a crop. It's the same thing for the Force as well, except for it's 4.3 at 21 megapixels. Video has several options. I'm happy to see that not only do we have full HD at 30 frames per second, but 1080p at 60 frames per second. And of course, you've got Ultra HD 4K. Otherwise, you can change to the front-facing camera. This lets you switch between several modes, your automatic mode, your slow motion mode, panorama, video, and of course just automatic mode. Timer, flash, HDR setting, it's touch to focus, and then you can control the exposure compensation. So nice little camera. I do want to say though that in some situations both of these cameras can be pretty slow to take pictures. It's usually in less than favorable lighting. It takes a long time to take an HDR photo, and it takes a pretty long time during the low light setting. I also noticed that both of these have a tendency to take several photos in a row. I think it's for the best shot feature. It will try to pick the best shot in a string of photos, and I can't find a way to disable that, so that can get pretty annoying. And who knows, that might be a reason for why it can take so long sometimes to take a picture. But in nice lighting, it's quick to take a picture without any shutter lag. It's decently quick to focus. It's just still not my favorite. But let's take a look at some picture quality. A very subtle difference that I first noticed between the Z and the Z Force is that the Z Force takes a little bit brighter pictures. I always see that the shutter is open a little bit longer. What's more pronounced though is just how much more detail the Z Force has in pictures over the Z. Even without pixel peeping, the Z's images look so much more mushy and not as sharp as the Z Force is. So if you're going to want to do any kind of photo editing or cropping, the Z Force is going to be the way to go. In terms of color rendering between the two, I really can't see meaningful differences between the way that the colors look. They both look pretty on key. I think the colors look nice, the colors look pretty accurate, not too oversaturated, which I appreciate. When looking at pictures compared to the Galaxy S7, for example, the S7 just oversaturates things pretty crazily, which becomes very obvious against a monotone background, where the Z and the Z Force do a good job to keep the scene looking nice and natural. During some HDR scenes, though, it can end up pushing that saturation, so it ends up being overall a mixed bag of tricks. But still, with HDR mode, I find that it does a good job to bring back details and shadows. As for scenarios in lower lighting, I find that the Z performs a little bit worse than the Z Force. I find that the Z Force is a little bit brighter with a little bit less noise. But then there comes the situation of extremely low lighting. I find that they perform pretty much about the same, except for maybe the Z Force has a hair more light. So as point and shoots go, they're pretty good cameras. I like the color rendering on both of them. Low light isn't horrific, finally, but I'm really not happy how the Z Force just has so much more detail. So now we are wrapping this up. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Erica, the technology nerd, likes to film stuff. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. So in terms of modularity, these are the best modular phones on the market, hands down. I think the modularity is more worth it for the smaller, thinner Z phone, just because of how thick and cumbersome it can be. Aside from being modular, though, both of these are nice, powerful, quick phones. I really like that the interfaces don't have much to them. It hasn't been fooled with, and honestly, I'm starting to like this more and more because it's not all laggy. Apps open nice and quickly. It is a fantastic performer in the app switching and multitasking department. You do have a nice, quick, accurate fingerprint sensor on here, which I'm really hoping they are able to turn into a home button somehow. You've got nice displays on these, really nice high resolution. Both of these have pretty decent cameras. They're not the absolute best on the market, but they're really going to get the job done. They've got Qualcomm 2.0 quick charging, so they're up to snuff with other Snapdragon 820 devices out there on the market. So they offer a lot more than just simply being a modular phone, but they do add that aspect as well. They're also looking pretty stylish as long as you add a style cover to it. In all honesty, though, the one that I'm most interested in, interestingly, after playing with these, is the Z Force. And aside from having one of these style shell covers, I probably wouldn't get any of the mods at all unless it was the speaker. This one's just such a more proficient phone in every way. Better camera, you've got better performance because this one throttles down a little bit more quickly. It's got such a bigger battery, and unless you want to carry around a brick or buy one of these for 50 to 80 bucks, well, this also has a shatterproof display. And that could be annoying to some, but all you have to do is simply remove this outer part here, buy a new $30 lens that they're going to sell, and bada bing, bada boom, you've got a nice protected phone. I'm not minding this shatterproof screen at all. So for me, this would be the way to go, you guys. I'm just angry that it's only available on Verizon, so that kind of has turned me off quite a bit. But oh well, what can you do? And if I'm betting on it, they will probably end up having an unlocked version somewhere at some time. Don't quote me on that, but it's just an assumption. I don't see why they wouldn't, or at least make some version of it that will be available unlocked. So again, this has been Erica, the technology nerd, likes to film stuff. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I hope I have answered your questions. Let me know what you think of these phones. Which one would you get? And goodbye.